There are people who walk into a room and everything shifts, not because they're trying to command attention, they're often trying to minimize their presence, but something about them creates discomfort, fascination, or intensity that others can't ignore. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Psychological integration creates presence, not performance, not persona, not trying to be powerful, but genuine wholeness. When you integrate your shadow, dissolve false identities, and become authentically yourself, you develop what Jung called psychological density, a kind of presence that's palpable to others. Most people live fragmented. They've split off parts of themselves, maintain personas, perform identities, hide darkness, project shadows. This fragmentation creates psychological weakness. They're not fully present because they're internally divided. But when someone does the work Jung described, shadow integration, ego dissolution, authentic individuation, they become psychologically whole. And that wholeness creates intensity. It's not mystical energy or spiritual superiority. It's simple psychology. A whole person has more psychological gravity than a fragmented person. They're more present, more real, more themselves. And that realness is either magnetic or threatening, depending on the other person's level of consciousness. Jung noticed this pattern in his own life. After his confrontation with the unconscious, his period of profound psychological integration, people responded to him differently. Some were drawn intensely, others became uncomfortable, hostile, or avoidant. His presence had changed not because he was trying to be powerful, but because he'd become psychologically whole. If you're experiencing similar patterns, people responding to you with unusual intensity, either positive or negative, Jung would say you've likely achieved a level of integration most people avoid. And these 5 signs reveal exactly how your presence affects others and why most can't handle it. The first sign your presence is too powerful is also the most common, and once you understand it, you'll recognize it constantly. People feel psychologically exposed around you, not because you're judging them, but because your authenticity reveals their inauthenticity. Your presence acts like a mirror that reflects what they're hiding from themselves. Here's what's happening. When you've integrated your shadow and dissolved your personas, you stop performing. You're just you. Authentic, immediate, real. No filtering, no performing, no hiding. And that authenticity is psychologically threatening to people who are still performing, hiding, maintaining false selves. Think of it like standing next to someone in bright sunlight when they've been carefully applying makeup in dim lighting. They thought they looked perfect. The makeup was seamless. The performance was convincing. But in bright light, suddenly every imperfection is visible. Every bit of artifice is obvious. They're not upset about the sunlight. They're upset that it's revealing what they were trying to hide. Your authenticity is the sunlight. You're not doing anything to them. Your mere presence reveals the performance they're maintaining. Jung observed this constantly in his practice. Patients who'd done deep integration work would report that people became uncomfortable around them. Friends would make comments like, "You've changed," or "You're too intense now," or "You make me feel bad about myself." But the integrated person wasn't doing anything. Their wholeness was simply revealing others' fragmentation. One patient described it perfectly. "I stopped performing, stopped filtering, stopped hiding. I'm just being myself now, fully, authentically. And people are acting like I'm attacking them. I'm not. I'm just not pretending anymore. but apparently my not pretending makes their pretending obvious to them, and they hate that. This is the first sign of powerful presence. People feel seen, exposed, transparent around you. Their personas feel thin, their performances feel obvious, their shadows feel visible. Not because you're pointing them out, but because your authenticity makes their inauthenticity impossible to ignore. Some people respond to this by being drawn to you. They recognize your authenticity as permission for their own. But most people respond by avoiding you, feeling uncomfortable, or becoming hostile, because maintaining their performance requires everyone else to keep performing. Your authenticity threatens the collective agreement to stay unconscious. Jung was clear. This isn't your problem to solve. You're not responsible for making others comfortable with your authenticity. The exposure they feel is their psyche trying to show them their own fragmentation. Whether they use that awareness to grow or retreat deeper into performance is their choice, not your responsibility. When you recognize this pattern, that people feel exposed by your presence, you stop taking their discomfort personally. You understand. They're not reacting to you. They're reacting to what your wholeness reveals about their fragmentation. If the first sign explains individual reactions, this second one reveals why groups, communities, and collectives often struggle with your presence. You unsettle collective consciousness. Groups that operate on shared unconsciousness become destabilized by your presence because you're not participating in the collective agreements everyone else maintains. Every group has unspoken agreements. Families agree on whose role is what. Friend groups agree on whose personality is which. Workplaces agree on whose position is where. Communities agree on what's acceptable. These agreements create collective identity, and the collective resists anyone who threatens those agreements. When you've individuated, when you become authentically yourself rather than playing assigned roles, you automatically violate collective agreements. You're no longer the person the family needed you to be, no longer performing the role your friend group assigned, no longer conforming to workplace expectations, no longer accepting community limitations. Jung called this individuation's threat to the collective. The collective requires conformity to function. When someone individuates, they withdraw their participation in collective unconsciousness, and the collective responds with pressure, punishment, rejection, anything to force conformity again. One of Jung's patients experienced this dramatically. A woman who'd done profound integration work returned to her family for a holiday gathering. She wasn't performing her usual role, the caretaker, the peacemaker, the one who absorbed everyone's problems. She was just being herself, present, authentic, boundaried. The family imploded. They accused her of being cold, selfish, changed. They said things like, "What happened to you?" and "You're not yourself anymore." But what they really meant was, "You're not playing your assigned role, and that's threatening our family system." Jung told her, "You haven't become cold, you've become whole. And your wholeness reveals that the family system was based on your fragmentation. They need you fragmented to maintain their unconsciousness. Your integration is an existential threat to their collective identity." This is the second sign. Groups become unstable around you, not because you're disruptive, but because your presence reveals collective patterns that depend on shared unconsciousness. Your authenticity exposes family dynamics that require certain members to play certain roles, social groups that bond through mutual judgment or gossip, workplace cultures that maintain hierarchy through fear, Communities that enforce conformity through shame. Think of it like one person stopping in a coordinated dance. Everyone's been moving in synchronized patterns, same steps, same rhythm, same movements. Then one person stops dancing and just stands there, being themselves. Suddenly, the whole choreography becomes obvious. The synchronized movement that seemed natural now looks like performance. Everyone else starts feeling self-conscious about the dance they're doing. The person who stopped isn't disrupting anything. They're just no longer participating in the unconscious agreement to keep dancing. Your presence doesn't fit into collective patterns. You can't be easily categorized, controlled, or predicted. And that unpredictability is destabilizing to groups that operate on unconscious agreements. When you recognize this, that your presence unsettles collectives, you stop trying to fit into group dynamics that require your fragmentation. You accept that individuated people often exist on the edges of collectives rather than embedded in them, not from rejection, but from incompatibility between wholeness and collective unconsciousness. The first two signs explained how your presence affects individuals and groups, but this third one reveals something about the quality of your presence itself. Your silence carries more weight than most people's words. When you're quiet, people feel it. When you're present, people notice. Your mere existence in a space shifts the energy, not because you're trying, but because you're psychologically dense. Most people fill silence with noise. They talk to avoid discomfort, perform to maintain attention, gesture to signal presence. Their presence is sustained through constant output. Words, actions, reactions stop the output, and they disappear from awareness. But when you've integrated, your presence doesn't depend on performance. You can sit in silence and people still feel you there. You can be completely still and people still track your reactions. You can say nothing and people wonder what you're thinking. Your presence is self-sustaining. Think of the difference between a loudspeaker and a tuning fork. The speaker has to keep producing sound to be noticed, turn it off, and it's just dead equipment. But a tuning fork, once struck, continues resonating. The vibration is subtle but persistent. You feel it more than hear it. Other sounds come and go, but the tuning fork's frequency remains. Your presence is the tuning fork, not loud but resonant, not demanding attention but impossible to ignore. Jung noticed this in his own presence and in patients who'd done deep work. Their silence had quality. Their stillness had impact. They didn't need to speak to be heard or move to be noticed. Something about their integrated presence created psychological weight that others felt even when they were completely quiet. One patient described discovering this. I stopped trying to be interesting, stopped performing in conversations, stopped filling silence. And something strange happened. People became more interested in what I had to say, not less. When I did speak, people listened differently. My silence made my words more powerful, not less. This is the third sign. Your presence has density that doesn't require performance. When you walk into a room, people sense something. When you speak, people pay attention. When you're silent, people feel that too. Your psychological weight is palpable. This can be uncomfortable because it makes you visible even when you want to be invisible. You can't blend into backgrounds anymore, can't hide in groups, can't disappear into social situations. Your presence announces itself whether you want it to or not. But Jung would say, this is evidence of integration. Fragmented people can hide in plain sight. They're performing personas that blend with collective expectations. Whole people stand out simply by being themselves, not from effort, but from authenticity that creates psychological density. When you recognize this, that your silence carries weight, you stop apologizing for your presence. Stop trying to minimize yourself to make others comfortable. You accept that integration creates visibility, and visibility is the price of wholeness. If you're recognizing these patterns, people feeling exposed around you, collectives becoming unstable, your silence carrying weight, you're experiencing what Jung called the presence of the individuated. This isn't about being special or superior. It's about being whole in a world that rewards fragmentation. And that wholeness creates intensity that most people, still living fragmented, unconscious lives, find overwhelming. These aren't problems to fix. They're natural consequences of doing the psychological work most people avoid. And understanding them helps you stop apologizing for your presence and start accepting it as evidence of integration. Before we explore the final 2 signs that reveal the full impact of powerful presence, check out our new guide, True Self-Discovery, with 24 practical reflection exercises designed to help you find your way within. Click below to get True Self-Discovery. Let's continue, because these final signs show why your presence challenges people at the deepest level. The first 3 signs explained how your presence affects others, but this 4th one reveals why that effect is often negative, and why you become a target for unconscious projection. People project their shadow onto you. What they've denied in themselves, they see in you. Your integrated darkness becomes the screen for their disowned darkness, and they attack you for qualities they refuse to acknowledge in themselves. Here's what's happening psychologically. Most people repress their shadow, the parts of themselves they consider unacceptable: anger, selfishness, aggression, sexuality, ambition, ruthlessness. They can't own these qualities, so they project them onto others. When you've integrated your shadow, you're no longer repressing these qualities. You've made them conscious. You own your capacity for darkness while choosing not to act destructively. But that ownership, that conscious relationship with your shadow, triggers others' projections. They see in you what they can't see in themselves. If they've repressed their anger, they'll perceive you as angry even when you're calm. If they've denied their selfishness, they'll accuse you of being selfish even when you're boundaried. If they've rejected their ambition, they'll see you as power-hungry even when you're simply confident. Jung watched this pattern constantly. Integrated patients would report being accused of qualities they had actually transcended through integration. The person who had integrated rage and learned healthy boundaries would be called aggressive. The person who had owned their sexuality and developed mature expression would be labeled inappropriate. The person who'd accepted their ambition and channeled it constructively would be deemed manipulative. One patient, a man who'd done years of shadow work, described this painfully. I integrated my capacity for violence, not to become violent, but to own that I'm capable of it and choose differently. Now, people say I'm threatening or dangerous, even though I'm less violent than I've ever been. They're projecting their disowned violence onto me because I'm no longer repressing mine. My consciousness of my shadow triggers their unconsciousness of theirs. This is the 4th sign. You become the container for others' disowned darkness. They project onto you what they refuse to integrate in themselves. And those projections can be intense. You're called too much by people who've repressed their intensity. You're labeled selfish by people who can't prioritize themselves. You're accused of being cold by people who've dissociated from their feelings. You're seen as threatening by people who've denied their power. Think of it like someone throwing their trash into your yard because they refuse to acknowledge they produce trash. They maintain the fiction that their property is pristine by dumping their waste onto yours. Then they point at your yard and say, "Look how messy that person is." The trash isn't yours, it's theirs. But they need someone to carry it so they can avoid seeing they produce it. Your integrated presence makes you the perfect projection screen because you're conscious of the darkness they're unconscious of. Jung was clear. These projections are not your truth. They're others' disowned material, and trying to defend against them or change their perception is futile because the projection isn't really about you. It's about what they can't face in themselves. When you recognize this pattern, that people project their shadow onto you, you stop taking their accusations personally. You understand. They're not seeing you. They're seeing their disowned selves reflected in you. And until they do their own shadow work, they'll keep projecting. The previous signs explained various effects of your presence, but this final one reveals the ultimate pattern that governs all interactions with integrated people. Your presence creates a binary. People either grow around you or distance themselves from you. There's rarely middle ground. You catalyze transformation or trigger avoidance, and most people choose avoidance. Here's the psychological reality. Your wholeness confronts others with their fragmentation, not through words or actions, but through mere existence. When people are around you, they feel the discrepancy between your integration and their fragmentation. And that discrepancy creates pressure, unconscious pressure to either grow toward wholeness or retreat into comfortable unconsciousness. Some people respond to this pressure by growing. Your authenticity gives them permission for theirs. Your integration shows them what's possible. Your presence catalyzes their transformation. These people are drawn to you intensely, not because you're perfect, but because you're whole, and they recognize that wholeness as a path forward. But most people respond to this pressure by creating distance. Your presence is too uncomfortable. The gap between your consciousness and their unconsciousness is too stark. The work your wholeness implies is too daunting, so they avoid you, drift away, or create conflict that justifies separation. Jung observed this pattern in his own relationships and his patients' experiences. After significant integration work, people would report that their social circles completely reorganized. Some relationships deepened dramatically, becoming more authentic, intimate, real. But most relationships ended, not through dramatic conflict, but through quiet drifting as people unconsciously chose distance over growth. One of Jung's patients described this reorganization. After my shadow work, I lost most of my friends. Not because I changed who I liked, because I stopped pretending, stopped performing, stopped maintaining relationships based on shared unconsciousness. Some people met me in that authenticity, and our relationships deepened beyond anything I'd known. But most people just disappeared. They stopped calling, stopped initiating, stopped showing up. My presence demanded either growth or distance, and they chose distance. Jung told her something crucial. This isn't rejection, it's selection. Your integration is naturally selecting for people capable of meeting you in consciousness. The ones who leave aren't bad or wrong. They're just not ready for the level of authenticity you now require. And that's okay. Wholeness is naturally isolating because most people choose comfortable unconsciousness over uncomfortable consciousness. This is the fifth sign. Your relationships become polarized. People either move closer drawn by your authenticity, inspired by your integration, catalyzed toward their own growth, or move away, uncomfortable with your presence, unable to maintain performance around you, choosing unconsciousness over the growth you represent. There's rarely anything in between. Casual friendships become difficult because your presence is too intense for surface connection. You either connect deeply or not at all. Think of it like a heat source in a cold room. Some people move toward the heat. They need warmth and are willing to get close despite the intensity. But most people move away from the heat source. They're used to the cold, and the warmth is uncomfortable, demanding, too intense. The heat isn't doing anything to them, it's just being heat. But its mere existence forces everyone to choose, move closer and get warm, or move away and stay cold. There is no comfortable middle distance where you get a little warmth without any intensity. This polarization can feel lonely. You lose the middle ground of casual relationships, lose the comfort of large social circles, lose the ease of surface connections. But what you gain is depth, relationships with the few people capable of meeting you in wholeness, authenticity, consciousness. Jung believed this was the necessary price of individuation. Wholeness is inherently polarizing. You can't be integrated and universally comfortable to be around. Integration creates intensity that either draws people deeper or pushes them away. When you recognize this, that your presence demands growth or distance, you stop trying to make everyone comfortable. Stop attempting to maintain relationships that require your fragmentation. You accept that integration naturally selects for conscious relationships and releases unconscious ones. If you're experiencing these 5 patterns, Jung would say, you've achieved a level of integration that most people avoid, and that integration creates presence most people can't handle. The 5 signs reveal the full impact. 1. People feel exposed around you. Your authenticity reveals their inauthenticity. 2. You unsettle collectives. Your individuation threatens collective unconsciousness. 3. Your silence is louder than others' words. Your presence has density that doesn't require performance. 4. People project their shadow onto you. You become the screen for their disowned darkness. 5. Your presence demands growth or distance. People either transform around you or avoid you. These aren't signs you're doing something wrong. They're evidence you're doing something right. The psychological work most people avoid. Shadow integration, ego dissolution, authentic individuation. That work creates wholeness, and wholeness creates presence. But Jung was clear. This presence comes with costs. You lose comfortable unconsciousness, lose easy social acceptance, lose the ability to blend into collective dynamics. You become too intense for most people, too authentic for surface relationships, too whole for fragmented connections. The question isn't whether to have this presence. If you've done the work, you already have it. The question is whether you'll apologize for it or own it, whether you'll minimize yourself to make others comfortable or accept that wholeness is inherently powerful. If you recognize these 5 signs in your life, Jung would want you to know your presence is powerful because you're integrated, and integration is rare in a world that rewards fragmentation. The 5 signs aren't problems to solve, they're patterns to recognize. People feel exposed. Own your authenticity without apologizing. You unsettle collectives. Accept that individuation isolates. Your silence carries weight. Stop minimizing your presence. People project onto you. Don't take their shadows personally. You demand growth or distance. Let relationships reorganize naturally. These patterns reveal you've done work most people avoid. You've integrated shadow while they repress it, dissolved ego while they inflate it, become authentic while they perform personas. That work created wholeness, and wholeness creates powerful presence. Jung's promise: stop apologizing for your presence. Stop trying to make everyone comfortable. Stop minimizing yourself to fit collective expectations. Your power isn't arrogance, it's integration. Your intensity isn't aggression, it's authenticity. Your presence isn't too much, it's whole. The people who can't handle it aren't wrong, they're just not ready. And that's not your problem to solve. Your responsibility is being whole, not making fragmented people comfortable with your wholeness. Own your presence, accept its power, trust that it will naturally attract the few who can meet you there, and naturally repel the many who can't. That's not rejection, that's selection. And selection is how consciousness finds consciousness. If these signs revealed the source of your powerful presence, subscribe to this channel for Jungian psychology that honors integration over performance. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now. Remember, your presence is powerful because you're whole, and wholeness is the most radical thing you can be in a world that demands fragmentation.